The Fairy and the Witch's Wager. Under a fractured sky, where clouds moved like secrets whispered in haste, the edge of dreams shimmered with a light that was neither day nor night. It was a realm beyond time, a liminal space where the worlds of mortals and immortals bled together. The stars hung heavy and low, their brilliance subdued, as if they too were wary of what would unfold. Two figures stood at the precipice, their forms stark contrast to one another. One was the fairy, radiant as the first light after a storm. Her silken wings reflected an unearthly glow, each beat stirring the air like a whispered promise. The other was the witch, cloaked in a black so deep it seemed to drink in the light, her sharp eyes glittering with ancient malice. "You're wrong, you know," the fairy said, her voice crystalline but tinged with an uncharacteristic edge. "Love is eternal. No force, no trial, no sorrow can break it when it is true." The witch chuckled, a sound like brittle leaves crushed underfoot. Such naive drivel. Love is a candle in the wind, a flicker easily extinguished by doubt, pain, or time. It is not eternal. It is fragile, fleeting. "And yet it endures," the fairy countered, stepping closer, her luminescence a defiant beacon against the witch's consuming shadow. "Even amidst despair, even when the world conspires against it." The witch tilted her head, her expression a cruel mockery of intrigue. "Then let us test your precious belief. Let us wager on it." The fairy paused, a shadow crossing her luminous face. "A wager?" "Yes," the witch hissed, a grin unfurling on her lips. "There is a pair of mortals, lovers, bound by chance and affection. The prince, noble and ambitious, and the princess, brave but prideful. They are your paragon of love, are they not?" "They are pure of heart," the fairy replied, though her tone betrayed a flicker of hesitation. "Then let us see," the witch continued, her voice smooth as poison. "We will place them upon the crucible of trials, each crafted to test their devotion, to strain the very fabric of their bond. If they endure, you win, and I shall concede the strength of love." "And if they fail?" the fairy asked, her wings quivering in the still air. The witch's smile widened, jagged and predatory. "Then I win, and you will acknowledge love as the fragile delusion it truly is. The stakes are clear." The fairy turned her gaze to the horizon, where the mortal world lay, veiled in mist and uncertainty. The prince and princess, young, hopeful and untested, seemed so small, so unknowing of the forces conspiring over their fates. Her heart ached for them, but her conviction remained resolute. "Very well," she said at last, her voice steady. "But I will not let them face this alone. I will guide them, offer them what aid I can." The witch's laughter echoed, sharp and mocking. "And I will do the same, in my own way. We shall see whose influence prevails." As the first rays of dawn touched the edge of dreams, the fairy and the witch reached out, their powers weaving threads of enchantment into the fabric of the mortal world. The wager was cast, the trials prepared, and the fates of the prince and princess sealed. The edge of dreams grew still once more, but its air hummed with a silent anticipation, as if the realm itself held its breath. Somewhere in the waking world, two lovers stirred, unaware that their lives were about to be forever changed. For the fairy and the witch, the game had only just begun. The prince and princess awoke in a world that felt stolen from the edge of a dream. Around them stretched an infinite expanse of glass, smooth and cold, reflecting a sky split between golden dawn and midnight shadow. Every step they took reverberated with a crystalline resonance, each echo fading into the abyss. It was a place both beautiful and unnervingly fragile, as if it might shatter beneath the weight of existence itself. "What is this place?" the princess asked, her voice trembling with wonder and unease. She knelt, running her hand across the gleaming surface. It felt warm, like the remnants of a fading fire. The prince stood beside her, his eyes scanning the horizon. No land, no markers, no signs of life, only the endless, unyielding sea of glass. "A dream, perhaps," he said, though the conviction in his voice faltered. "But one we share? That is no ordinary dream." From above, unseen but omnipresent, the fairy and the witch watched their creations take shape. "The first trial is simplicity itself," the witch murmured, her voice curling like smoke in the air. "A test of courage, balance, and trust. They must cross the glass sea, where every step reveals what lies hidden in the soul. Will they endure the reflection of their flaws, or will the cracks begin to show?" The fairy, luminous even in her worry, whispered back, "They will endure. Love binds them." The prince and princess took their first tentative steps. The glass beneath their feet responded with shimmering ripples, revealing fleeting images, fragments of memories, fears, and unspoken truths. The prince's steps faltered as he saw his reflection ripple and twist, transforming into a visage he barely recognized. It was himself, but hollow-eyed and wearied, burdened by the weight of unfulfilled ambition. Behind him loomed shadows of faceless courtiers and the looming expectations of a kingdom. The princess caught his hesitation and turned, her own reflection shifting as she moved. She saw herself, alone in a vast hall of marble and cold fire, her crown heavy, her gaze distant. It was a vision of pride and solitude, a queen untouchable but unloved. "This glass," the prince muttered, shaking his head. "It shows too much." "Then look at me," the princess said, her voice steady despite the trembling of her hands. "Not at the glass. Let us walk together." Their steps quickened, their hands clasped tightly, but the glass sea was merciless. With each stride, the ripples grew sharper, the reflections darker. The prince saw the shadow of a throne he might never claim. The princess glimpsed a kingdom crumbling under the weight of her fears. Each vision clawed at their resolve, sowing doubt and discord. From her perch in the heavens, the witch smirked. They begin to falter. But the fairy, with a glimmer in her eye, whispered winds of encouragement, invisible to mortal senses. A faint melody carried across the expanse, soft and haunting. It was a song known only to the prince and princess, a lullaby from a distant night when their love was young and unburdened by the world. The prince stopped abruptly, turning to the princess. "Do you hear it?" "I do," she replied, her gaze lifting to meet his. The melody wrapped around them like a forgotten promise, rekindling a strength they hadn't known they possessed. "It's us. It always has been." Hand in hand, they moved with purpose now, their reflections fading into the periphery. The vision still whispered, but their voices no longer mattered. The lovers' steps grew surer, their hearts lighter, until the far shore appeared, a faint line of silver on the horizon. When they finally reached it, the glass sea grew still, its surface smoothing into silence. The prince and princess collapsed into each other's arms, their breaths mingling in the cold air. The trial was done, though neither could yet name it as such. In the realm above, the fairy smile was tinged with quiet triumph. They see each other now, truly see each other. The witch's gaze darkened, though a flicker of grudging respect crossed her sharp features. But this is only the first step. The hardest truths lie ahead. As the lovers rested, unaware of the forces conspiring over their fates, the glass sea began to fade, its shards dissolving into the void. The next trial awaited, its labyrinthine corridors stirring in the shadows of the waking world. The prince and princess awoke to the sound of whispers, soft as the rustling of unseen wings. Around them loomed a forest of mirrored trees, their branches twisting into an infinite canopy of silver and shadow. The ground beneath their feet shimmered, reflecting their faces back to them with unsettling clarity. Every surface seemed alive, capturing their movements in glimmers of light and faint distortions. "What sorcery is this?" the prince asked, his voice low but taut with unease. His hand brushed the trunk of a mirrored tree, and the surface rippled, revealing fleeting images. His childhood self, his father's stern gaze, a crown that gleamed like a burden in the distance. The princess stepped beside him, her reflection multiplied endlessly in the mirrored labyrinth. "It feels alive," she whispered, her voice echoing unnaturally, growing louder, then softer, as if the very air sought to consume her words. "Like it knows us." Above them, hidden in the folds of twilight, the fairy and the witch observed, their eternal argument carried in the space between their words. "The Labyrinth of Echoes," the witch intoned, her voice curling like smoke in the vastness. "Every step they take will reveal what they hide, even from themselves. Every echo will test their bond, sowing doubt and discord. Will they trust each other when truth becomes a weapon? The fairy's wings shimmered with soft defiance. Truth may wound, but it also heals. They will learn to share the weight of their fears. Their love will grow stronger. Or fracture under the strain, the witch countered, her smile sharp as a blade. The lovers ventured deeper into the labyrinth, their reflections distorting with every turn. The whispers grew louder, coalescing into voices they recognized, familiar, beloved, and haunting. The princess paused as a voice called her name, soft and aching. She turned to see a reflection unlike her own, a younger version of herself, cradled in the arms of a woman with a face etched in sorrow. "Mother," she breathed, her hands trembling as she reached out. The image rippled, and her mother's voice filled the air. "You are strong, my daughter, but strength can be a prison. Your pride will keep you alone. Do not make the mistakes I did." Tears blurred the princess's vision. "It's not true," she whispered, clutching her arms as if to shield herself. "I am not alone." The prince moved to her side, but before he could comfort her, the labyrinth turned its gaze upon him. From a nearby mirrored wall, a voice rose deep and accusatory. It was his father's. "Ambition is your undoing, boy. You dream of glory but neglect the crown's true cost. You cannot protect her. You will fail her." The prince stiffened, his jaw tightening. "Lies," he muttered, though his reflection betrayed him. His eyes clouded with doubt, his shoulders heavy with unspoken guilt. The labyrinth grew colder, the echoes sharper. The lovers were trapped now, each ensnared by their own fears. The fairy's light wavered, but she whispered a soft wind through the labyrinth, carrying a faint warmth to their hearts. "Speak to each other," she urged, though they could not hear her. "Do not let silence consume you." The witch, unseen but ever present, deepened the shadows. Let them drown in their own echoes. The princess turned to the prince, her voice trembling but resolute. "Do you hear them too? The voices?" He nodded, his expression guarded. "They twist the truth, but some of it feels real, too real." She took a step closer, her reflection merging with his in the mirrored ground. "Then we must face it together. Tell me what you see. Let me bear it with you." The prince hesitated, but her steady gaze drew the words from him. "I see failure. I see a crown I might never wear, a kingdom I might lose, and I see you, leaving me because of it." The princess placed her hand over his. "I see pride, cold and isolating. A part of me fears it will drive you away, but I'm still here and so are you." Their voices, spoken aloud, shattered the labyrinth's whispers. The mirrors around them wavered, their surfaces growing still. Where once they reflected fear, they now reflected resolve, a shared determination to face the labyrinth as one. The path ahead became clear. the mirrored walls parting to reveal an exit bathed in soft light. Together they stepped forward, leaving the echoes behind. Above, the fairy exhaled a soft sigh of relief. "They are learning," she said. "Their love grows stronger." The witch's gaze darkened, though her smile remained. The labyrinth was merely a prelude. The next trial will unravel them entirely. In the mortal world, the prince and princess emerged into a vast plain, its horizon crowned by an obsidian altar that loomed against the blood-red sky. The final trial awaited. The air was heavy as the prince and princess approached the altar, each step drawing them closer to the dark monolith that pulsed with an unnatural energy. The plain was barren, the ground cracked and dry, as though it had long forgotten the taste of life. Above, the sky churned with crimson clouds, their shapes shifting like restless spirits. The altar stood alone, a slab of obsidian etched with glowing runes that flickered like dying embers. It exuded a gravity that pulled at their souls, beckoning yet warning. The whispers from the labyrinth had gone silent, but their absence only amplified the weight of this moment. "What is this place?" the princess asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She reached out as if to touch the altar, but stopped short, her fingers trembling. The prince examined the runes, their shapes twisting under his gaze. "It feels final," he said, his voice hollow, "as if this is the end, one way or another." Above them, the fairy and the witch watched, their silent conflict reflected in the altar's shifting glow. "This trial is simple," the witch said, her tone laced with mockery. "They must offer a piece of themselves, something they hold most dear, a sacrifice that will leave them changed forever." "Love demands sacrifice," the fairy countered, though her voice wavered. "But it is through sacrifice that love becomes unbreakable." "Or unattainable," the witch replied with a smirk. "Let us see how far their love truly reaches." The prince stepped closer to the altar, his shadow stretching unnaturally across the barren plain. The runes began to pulse faster, their glow casting his face in stark relief. He turned to the princess, his expression grave. I think we must each give something precious." The princess met his gaze, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. "What could we give that is enough?" The altar answered in silence, its runes flaring as if mocking their uncertainty. The prince clenched his fists, his thoughts racing. Then, with a deep breath, he stepped forward and placed his hand on the obsidian surface. "I will give my ambition," he said, his voice steady but filled with sorrow. "It has driven me, consumed me, and blinded me, but it has also given me purpose. Without it, I am afraid of what I might become." The altar shuddered, its runes absorbing his words. A golden light flowed from the prince's chest, swirling into the obsidian slab. He staggered back, his breath shallow, his eyes hollowed by the weight of what he had lost. The princess caught him, her arm steady. "You are still you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You are still mine." The altar's runes flared again, this time brighter, waiting. The princess stepped forward, her reflection gleaming in its surface. She hesitated, her hands trembling. What could she offer that matched his sacrifice? "My pride," she said at last, her voice barely audible. "It has been my shield, my strength, but it has also kept me distant, even from you." Her hands pressed against the altar, and a silver light poured from her heart, merging with the golden glow already within the obsidian. The altar groaned as if satiated, the runes stabilizing into a steady hum. She fell to her knees, her strength sapped, her heart raw. For a moment, silence reigned. Then the altar split open, revealing two golden rings that shimmered like captured sunlight. The lovers reached for them instinctively, the rings fitting perfectly onto their fingers. The air around them changed, the crimson clouds dissolving into a soft golden dawn. The fairy smiled, her light brighter than it had been in centuries. They have passed. They have proven the depth of their love. The witch, her shadow wavering, regarded the lovers with a strange expression, something between disdain and respect. "They are changed," she said. "What they have given cannot be undone." "They are stronger for it," the fairy said, her voice resolute. "Love, tempered by sacrifice, becomes eternal." The witch turned away, her form dissolving into the wind. "Perhaps," she murmured, her voice barely audible, "but eternity is its own burden." As the altar crumbled into dust, the prince and princess stood hand in hand, their hearts heavier yet whole. The trials had left their mark, but their bond had grown unbreakable. In the distance, the world awaited them, brighter and more vivid than before. They did not look back as they stepped forward, their love a beacon that outshone even the fading glow of the altar behind them. The edge of dreams stirred once more as the fairy and the witch returned to their realm, the mortal trials concluded. The world below them shimmered faintly, still resonating with the echoes of the prince and princess's journey. In the stillness of this place, where time neither began nor ended, the two immortal figures stood face to face, their expressions as inscrutable as the forces they wielded. "They have prevailed," the fairy said softly, her silvery glow tempered with a solemn warmth. "Their love has endured, even when tested to its very core." The witch, cloaked in her shadowed mantle, tilted her head. Her smile was faint, almost imperceptible, and devoid of its usual venom. "Endured, yes, but at what cost? Ambition, pride, pieces of themselves that can never be reclaimed." "Those pieces were burdens," the fairy countered, her wings shimmering as if reflecting a distant sunrise. "They were barriers holding them apart. By letting them go, they found something greater." The witch stepped closer to the precipice, her gaze fixed on the mortal realm below. Perhaps, but they are not the same as they were. What they lost may haunt them, even in their happiness. Is that the victory you imagined? The fairy's light dimmed momentarily, as if her own thoughts clouded her brilliance. Sacrifice is the essence of love. It asks for pieces of ourselves, but in return, it gives unity, something unshakable. They will heal, and their bond will make them whole. The witch was silent for a moment, her gaze unreadable. They are remarkable, I'll admit, she said at last, her voice lacking its usual edge. Few would have endured what they did. Fewer still would have emerged stronger. The fairy turned to her, her expression hopeful. Then you see it now? Love is not fragile. It is a force that transcends fear, doubt, and even the self. The witch's laughter was soft, devoid of malice. You are ever the optimist. Perhaps you're right. Perhaps love is more enduring than I thought. She paused, her smile fading into something quieter, something almost human. But it is also rare. Not all who love can face such trials. Some will falter. Many will. Perhaps, the fairy conceded, her voice gentle. But when love is true, it will always find a way. The prince and princess are proof of that. The witch regarded her for a long moment, then turned her gaze back to the mortal world. The prince and princess were returning to their lives, their hands entwined, their steps steady despite the weight of their journey. The golden rings on their fingers caught the light, tiny beacons of the bond they had forged. They will remember the trials only as fragments of a dream, the witch said, her tone distant. The choices they made, the pain they endured, those memories will linger, but they will not know why. It is better that way, the fairy replied, her voice tinged with sadness. They deserve peace, not the burden of knowing they were pawns in our wager. The witch's shadow flickered, her form wavering as though the edge of dreams could no longer contain her. "And what of us?" she asked, her voice softer than the fairy had ever heard it. What have we gained or lost? The fairy's glow softened, her wings folding around her like a mantle. Perhaps we have both learned something, she said. Love is neither perfect nor indestructible, but it is worth believing in, worth fighting for. The witch turned to her, and for the first time in countless ages, her sharp gaze softened. Perhaps, she said, the word carrying the weight of 1,000 lifetimes. Without another word, she dissolved into the void, her presence fading like the final note of a mournful song. The fairy stood alone at the edge of dreams, her light a solitary beacon in the endless twilight. She gazed down at the prince and princess, who were now walking into a world that felt new, as if dawn itself had been reborn. In her heart, the fairy felt a quiet triumph, but also a deeper understanding of the fragility of what she cherished. The wager had ended, And though she had won, the victory felt less like conquest and more like revelation. And so, the edge of dreams grew still once more, the forces of light and shadow retreating to their timeless dance. The prince and princess lived on, their love tempered by trials and bound by sacrifice, a testament to the power of the heart. In the end, the wager was not about winning or losing, but about the truths revealed in the crucible of love and the mysteries that lingered long after the trials had passed.